I've been asked to just take a few minutes here to encourage you with a few words to come to a meeting tonight at 6 o'clock, and I can't think of any better way to encourage somebody than to actually read from the Word of God. So let's start there and just take a few minutes. And I use Matthew chapter 9, by the way. If you don't have to go there, I'll kind of walk through this. I'm going to run through it pretty quick, but I use Matthew chapter 9 to remind me about who the God is that I serve and who Jesus is. Because when you look at this in just one chapter, it doesn't take long for me to sort of grab it when I'm starting to feel like the political war is kind of welling up around me and there's a lot of fleshly battles starting to occur. I just like grabbing it and reminding myself that Jesus forgave and healed a paralytic in chapter 1. That Jesus walked by a man and said, "Follow me," to Matthew, and Matthew just got up and followed him. And that he had that kind of influence. That Jesus, when he was questioned about fasting, just responded so beautifully. He healed a woman just who touched his garment. He raised a girl from the dead just by taking her by the hand. The God we serve raised someone to the dead. So if you can imagine, if you're ever getting concerned in your own life about how things aren't really going your way, Jesus just took her hand. He gave sight back, and a mute man spoke, all in one chapter. But the part I wanted to focus on here just for a second is up in verse 35. It says here in chapter 9, it says, "Then Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every sickness and every disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were weary and they were scattered, like sheep having no shepherd." And that compassion that Jesus had for those people, actually it was not so long ago that I actually came to know a definition that for that word compassion that I've really held on to, and it was Dr. George Hill who told me what the definition of the word really meant. And what he said that the compassion that Jesus had is a sympathetic consciousness of the distress of others, along with a desire to alleviate it. In other words, it had to have those two parts. So you can have a sympathetic consciousness for the distress of others, but if you don't have that desire to alleviate it, then that's not really compassion. In Luke's gospel, in chapter 10, the Good Samaritan, we're all familiar with it, the priest and the Levite just walked by. They might have had a sympathetic consciousness of the distress of that man who was injured on the road between Jerusalem and Jericho, but it was the Good Samaritan who had the desire to alleviate it, and he stopped, and he showed compassion. That's what it says. So what I encourage people to do is, as we move towards the election, you might go, "Well, Doug, we're talking about politics and government, you're talking about compassion." As Christians, as we move towards the election, we have authority that we can exercise that will improve the lives of the fellow citizens, our neighbor, so as to speak, because this is the truth. Civil government, the civil government that we're about to elect, which is going to be elected by processes that are political, will have the power to make decisions that are going to impact the lives of our neighbor in either a positive or a negative way. And when it gets negative, sometimes it gets really negative. And when you're talking about the distress of others, there are some terrible, sad stories out there. And it's not always because people make their own choices and exercise their free will and make bad decisions. Sometimes they are set upon by thieves like the man on the road between Jerusalem and Jericho. Sometimes they are victimized by others, and sometimes those others are the government. Hello, thank you for joining us on the National Leadership Briefing today. It is good to be with you. My name is Doug Sharp, and I will be your host today. I hope you don't mind. I wanted to share that quick video with you this morning before we got started. Just wanted to make sure you had a good dose of encouragement, because as I mentioned before in some of the previous midweek touch points, we are going to do some heavy lifting here today. We're talking about very challenging issues at certain parts of the briefing, and I wanted you to be encouraged to remember the God that we serve, of course, but also our focus, and that is to have compassion on those that are impacted by the decisions of civil government. We have the government right now considering some very, very heavy issues in the House of Commons. We're going to be talking about that today. And we also are going to see firsthand from the kinds of conversations that we're having today, the detrimental effects that the decisions of government can have on the people that we care about the people we're called to care about, our neighbor, and the people that live in our communities, the vulnerable in particular. So thank you so much for allowing me to share that, and be encouraged. We're going to cover a lot today. Let me just go over some of the things. First off, we're going to start out with an answer period segment. For those of you who were with us last month, we launched the answer period segment. That is an opportunity for you in your churches, in your spheres of influence. If you would like to set up a time for me to go on a Zoom call with your group or with your church family, anybody you like, and if you want to fire questions at me, then I will provide, well, to the best of my ability and knowledge and experience, the answers to those questions. Of course, if I don't have the answer on the tip of my tongue, I will commit to find the answer for you and get it back to you. So had an opportunity to spend some time with more people that we serve. So we're going to share a question that I received on a Zoom call during an answer period segment that I recorded. The next thing we're going to be doing, we're going to have a member of Parliament joining us today who's going to talk to us about the all-important Bill C6. That's the conversion therapy bill that is before the House of Commons right now. So we're going to spend some time there. We're also going to be moving then on to talking to the executive director of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition here in Canada, and we're going to talk about Bill C7. That is the euthanasia bill that is before the House of Commons right now. Very important. As I also committed, we're going to be moving then into the boardroom, because I'm excited to encourage you once again, because I'm going to show you what influence looks like. We are going to give you real live examples as to what influence looks like when it is wielded in the hands of someone that comes on the national leadership briefing, and you in your own individual spheres of authority and influence. And then we're going to come back to the desk at that point, and I'm excited to have the opportunity today to share the next module of training in the CAG ministries. That CAG stands for Citizen Action Group Ministries, those infrastructures that exist within churches here in Canada that can support the efforts of the pastor to look for opportunities where you can use the authority within the citizens of your church family to advance the things that you believe in into society, culture, politics, and government. So that's what we've got on the schedule today. Looking forward to spending the next hour with you. We're going to make sure we honor that time and respect that time today. We'll get you right out of here on time. And we're going to make sure also that your time is well spent by providing you after the briefing today with a full list of all of the resources that we're going to discuss. You are going to, in particular on this particular briefing today, you are going to want to make sure that you check all of the resources in the post-briefing notes, because we are going to equip you today. By you being here today and by you being registered, you're going to have all that information available to you. So thanks so much. Let's get started right away and kick it off with an answer period segment that I hosted just this last week for a group of people in Ontario.
Doug, just wanted to ask you quickly, for 2021, what is our focus at a national level so that we could be on the same page and we could grow in 2021 in unity?
In unity. Great question, Abed. That is my heart, is the unifying of the people of God around the things that we believe in. We've obviously got the things in front of us that we're always going to have in front of us. We're always going to have another election in front of us, and we definitely have that coming our way. So we've got to be prepared for that moment in time. So if you took a kind of a marker off in the future when you thought the election might be and started tracking back all of the action points, the things that we need to do, that we know we need to do, like nominations. We got to get people nominated that represent our views and values, or are willing to at least represent our views and values. We've got to get key people in these key places so we don't get blown out all the time when we have candidates. We've got to do all of these things to get ready for the election. But I'll tell you what the biggest thing is that we've got to start developing the habit of coming together. And I mean physically. And I know it just sounds like another plug for the national leadership briefing,
But I really genuinely believe that if people of faith in Canada kept doing what they were doing, submit to the call of God on your life to serve wherever you're serving, wherever you are in the world, go do that. Definitely do that. But take 1 hour once a month and just touch base with me on the national leadership briefing so we can look each other in the eye and we can go, okay, we're all here for 1 hour once a month because we want to just remind ourselves that parents having the right to raise their kids the way they want is of paramount importance to us, that our right of belief and freedom of religion is something we will fight for, and we expect the elected representatives that serve us to do the same, that we want to make sure that any law or policy that we're looking through the lens at definitely provides for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable people among us, like mothers who are just finding out that they're young mothers who find out they're pregnant and they want a choice between Planned Parenthood and a pregnancy care center. And then we also need to make sure that we're not turning all of our kids into bond servants of civil government by having them buried in debt the moment they're born. So we got to start just touching base and developing that habit of coming together and reminding ourselves of these things that are above everything else, super important to us. Because when the distractions come and everybody tries to point at how different we all are, we can remind ourselves that, you know what, we're not so different when it comes to parents. And we're not so different when it comes to the right of freedom that we share. We all share this right of freedom. It's innate in us, and we're willing to fight for it. So that is 2021 for us. To Operation Engage in 2020 was all about engaging in whatever processes we could. Now in 2021, we've got some foundation there. We've got now over 1,600 individuals and organizations on the National Leadership Briefing. And if you added up all of the people in all of the organizations and all of the networks that are on the briefing, it comes to almost 900,000 people that are potentially going to be touched by the 4 pillars, the things that we believe in. So I say, let's turn it into a real 900,000. Let's drill down and reach out into the communities and find all our allies out there, the people that believe in the same things we do. Sikhs, Muslims, Hindus, Jews. We got lots of Jews, by the way, on the National Leadership Briefing. Good, lots of Jews. And our Christian friends, Catholic Christians, Mormons, they all believe in the same things we do, but we keep focusing on what's different about us. And we lose track and we get distracted. So unity, that's the message for 2021, coming together, establishing those good habits, and then looking for those opportunities where we can exercise our influence in government, politics, society, and culture. And that's what I help with on the National Leadership Briefing as well, is I'll be there to help you find those opportunities. These are the things that we believe in. First, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. Second, that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Number 3, that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable among us. And number 4, that it is inappropriate to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. They came from you. They're your pillars. They're the things that you believe. Well, thank you to those folks who invited me out to join them during that Zoom meeting. Looking forward to hearing more requests from you, as I love to do those meetings, answer period segments with groups. So just let me know, send me an email at president@familyaction.ca. Be happy to set something up with you. Now, also happy to share really quickly there, the 4 pillars, the things that we rally around. So don't forget that. Always got to slide that in there. Remember, that's what we're here for, is to advance those 4 pillars into society, culture, politics, and government. Well, moving right along, we now have a member of parliament joining us. Gentleman's name is Garnet Jennis. He is the member of parliament for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan. Let's waste no time, just get him connected right away, and let's have a conversation about what's happening in the House of Commons. And we're also going to be talking about, of course, foreign funding for abortion. So Garnet, are you with us? thank you for taking the time to talk to us about these very important issues, things that are happening in the House of Commons. We're going to get to in a moment. But first, I told all the people we serve before this national leadership briefing that you and I would have an opportunity to talk about foreign funding for abortions overseas, and you have a lot of information that I was quite shocked to discover when you shared it with me. So tell me a little bit about things that we need to know about the money we're sending overseas and who it's going to.
Well, thank you for that. I'm the Shadow Minister for International Development, the kind of point person in our caucus for that. And international development is an immense opportunity. It's an opportunity for Canadian dollars to be used to support the most vulnerable, to help governments around the world provide for the safety and security of their citizens more effectively, advancing justice, and also identifying areas of religious persecution and pushing back against that by combating it directly, but also by kind of upstream from religious persecution, trying to improve education, awareness, support for pluralism, and in a way that is going to help protect vulnerable minorities. There's so much good work we could be doing, and the Liberals have chosen to put a big focus on support for funding abortion overseas. One of the things that people may be less aware of is some of the specific organizations they're doing it in partnership with. And we're going to send some information, I understand, about Marie Stopes International. Canada has given about $30 million to this organization over the last 3 years. And this organization is just continually finding itself in controversy. Not just because it is involved in providing abortion, but because it has, in fact, someone from Marie Stopes International spoke on camera about doing illegal abortions, quote, all over the world. So doing abortions in countries where abortion is illegal, and doing them under conditions where it's illegal, doing abortions without anesthetic. And one of the quotes from someone at the organization was that, if they have a vocal local, someone who's experiencing a lot of pain, they just try and kind of manage it and talk through it, but without any kind of pain management. Distribution of contraceptives in the developing world that had actually been discontinued in the developed world because of concerns about side effects. So things being given to women and women being told that they're safe when those products had been discontinued in the developed world. So there's a question of following laws, of providing some of these things to people that are underage in contravention of local laws, as well as questions about the conditions that women are being put under in the context of these things. So really big questions about what Canadians are funding around the world through Marie Stopes. And I think these are questions that are often dismissed by the government because they want to say, well, feminist, that's who we are. But is this actually helping women when there's a lack of awareness and information for them, when there's big questions about whether products are even safe, given that they've been discontinued in terms of their use in the developed world?
What can we do locally here as members of the faith community to help first raise the awareness on this expenditure, the damage that it's doing internationally, and what we can do to change the minds and hearts of our elected representatives to spend money elsewhere in better places?
Well, I'm going to be part of a webinar that's happening on Wednesday, November 18th. It's 1 to 2 Eastern time, so 11 to 12 in Alberta, and 10 to 11 in BC. So not too early or too late wherever folks are in the country. Okay. And people who have a particular passion for international development, want to know more about Marie Stopes and what they're doing, how to push back, and also some of the alternatives, the ways we can really support women and girls and all people in poorer countries. I'd encourage you to participate in that webinar. We're going to be sending, I understand, some more information around on that. It's an important issue for people to be educated about, and to find out more about how they can engage and speak out on it, because you're right that there is pushback that often comes from these countries. You've got cultures around the world where there's just a big value placed on family, on children. And then you have messages, and it's been happening for decades, where there are messages that come from other developed countries that try to tell people, no, you should have smaller families, you should be having fewer children, you shouldn't be valuing these things, and trying to say that somehow reducing population is the way to development. But I don't think that's consistent with the data or the reality. It's colonial often, in that it tries to kind of impose cultural values on these, especially African nations who place
Right.
a lot of value on children and family. And it's and there's big issues about what these organizations are actually involved in, and the way they go about doing this, and the problems that this presents for women, when you have questions of people underage, questions about coercion being raised,
Right.
breaking of local laws, and potentially unsafe products being used.
Well, I'll tell you, yes, what we'll do is we will commit to, in the post briefing notes today, I'm going to send a fact sheet out that your office provided us on Marie Stopes, the funding, the services they provide, so that everyone has the facts about this organization and the monies. But then we're also going to commit in future midweek touch points. We're going to commit to getting out information on the November 18th meeting that you're going to be hosting to discuss this issue in more detail, and actionable items that people can take into their hands and apply immediately. So we'll commit to do that, Garnet, and happy to do that. Thank you so much. Moving on to Bill C6, there's people are talking about the conversion therapy bill in the House of Commons right now. Can you give us an update as to what it is and where we're at, what the track is that bill is on? And then ultimately, I'd like to actually ask, if you wouldn't mind, just giving us some suggestions about what we can do in response to what's happening. Now, I got to tell you, Garnet, here at the National Leadership Briefing, we teach and train that the last place we want to be is chasing legislation through the House of Commons, which kind of feels like what we're going to be doing here. But this thing's moving pretty fast ahead of us. We want to catch up and do everything we can to make this better than it looks. So please just let us know what we need to know about this piece of legislation.
Absolutely. So when I talk to people in churches about the issue of conversion therapy, most people's response is, "What's that?" It's just not something that's on a lot of people's radar. Conversion therapy were these series of practices that basically mostly discredited now, but that involved violence, coercion, electric shock therapy, targeting people who were gay and lesbian to try to change their sexual orientation. And these practices also often involved use of heterosexual pornography, prostitution, trying to kind of change associations and rewire people's brains. These were, I think, contrary to not only the moral standards of secular society, but very much contrary in terms of their methods to what Christians believe, because they involved violence, coercion, and hypersexualization. They were holding up this idea that it's all about sex, as opposed to affirming people's dignity as being rooted in something else. So I have no problem condemning conversion therapy and seeing these practices banned. I mean, they don't really happen much anymore, but for greater certainty, sure, we can. But the issue is the definition of conversion therapy, because the definition of conversion therapy in this bill does not just refer to those practices. It refers to any practice that seeks to reduce sexual attraction or behavior. So this raises big issues for respect for parental rights, parents raising their children, and also freedom of religion. If you have a pastor that's speaking about a kind of traditional Christian teachings around sexuality, that could be construed as an effort to reduce sexual attraction or behavior. If you have parents that are imposing house rules on their teenagers, they're saying, you can't, whether you consider your sexual identity to be, you can't be doing engaged in sexual activity under our roof. That's part of our family standards, part of our house rules here. That could be construed as an effort to reduce sexual attraction or behavior. So, I mean, there's a lot of problems and a lot of ambiguity in this definition. What does it mean for people that are seeking out counseling, people that are kind of grappling with different feelings they're having, and they want to have dialogue with pastors, with counselors, in a way that reflects their you know experiencing a certain sort of sexual identity, and also being a believer, a person of faith, and wanting to seek advice and counseling about how to live their lives. And these are conversations that happen in a free society. And yet this bill, with its flawed definition, could really put a chill on those conversations. So the emphasis we're putting here is on fixing the definition, because anytime you talk about concerns about the bill, the other side comes back and says, well, conversion therapy involves all these violent practices, and surely, how dare you be you be unwilling to move against those practices. But we have to make a distinction between real conversion therapy and the definition in the bill, and that's why we need to fix the definition. And actually, in terms of the House of Commons, so just to update you on the process, we just had the vote on second reading. The vote on second reading was very difficult for many of my colleagues, because a lot of them wanted to express their opposition to the principle of conversion therapy, because generally you think at second reading you're voting on the principle of the bill, not the text. So you vote on the principle, then it goes to committee, it's revised, refined, and then it's voted on at third reading. So I know there are many of my colleagues who have big concerns about the definition who still voted in favor of the bill at second reading, to show that they support banning conversion therapy in principle, but then are going to push very hard for amendments and vote against it at third reading if it's not amended. Some of us abstained, just recognizing that tension, and
Right.
some people voted against. But the real issue now is it's at committee. We've got to push for amendments to fix the definition, to clarify it, to say, let's not make this a political wedge. Let's work together to address conversion therapy, the real thing, while still protecting the rights of parents, the rights of religious institutions, but also just the right of individuals who may be experiencing different feelings, asking different questions in terms of sexual and gender identity, to be able to have those conversations, to seek counseling, and not to worry that any suggestion that they limit their sexual behavior in any context would be construed as conversion therapy.
Now, as far as people that we serve, what can we be doing, actionable items right now that can support you and what you're doing in the House of Commons?
Thank you for that. So it's all about fixing the definition of conversion therapy in the bill. And that's why we've got a website, fixthedefinition.ca. Very, very simple, fixthedefinition.ca. So people should go to that website, and we've got some very clear, concise information. We've also got on there a great testimonial video from a young man named Emmanuel, who just talks about growing up and identifying as gay, and being a Christian, and seeking out counseling, and how that counseling was very valuable for him, and how he's concerned that he wouldn't have been able to access that if something like C6 without amendments were in place. So he's joining the call for Fix the Definition, as are other people in similar situations. So go to fixthedefinition.ca and please sign the petition. Use the information, share the information, and share that petition with people. And signing that petition, it allows us to be in follow-up contact with you, to let you know about more opportunities as the legislation moves forward. We want to encourage people to contact their MPs, contact members of the Justice Committee, but going to that website and signing the petition is a good first step, because then it allows us to be following up and giving you more tools for contacting your legislators at key points in time along the way.
Fantastic. Good advice and good counsel, because we have citizen action groups in churches across the nation. And all of you in citizen action groups, all of you citizen action group leaders, please make sure that your groups are receiving this information and that you're fanning it out to your church families. Very important. Thank you, Garnet. I appreciate you taking the time today to be with us. I appreciate, again, all you're doing. Please let your colleagues know in the House that we are praying for them and willing to work with them to advance the good and halt the bad every chance we get. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and for all the great work you're doing.
Okay, so look to the post-briefing notes today for all of the resources that we spoke about during that chat with Garnet, and also keep an eye out for the information that we're going to be sending for that event, where we're going to be spending more time diving into foreign funding for abortions and the decisions of our current government to put large amounts of money, obviously, in the wrong place. Okay, moving along right away, I wanted to introduce you now to Alex Schadenberg. Alex is the executive director of the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. He has been monitoring the advancing legislation that is going through the House of Commons right now, and I'm looking forward to chatting with Alex about that. Alex, come on and just let's get started. Let's go back first to a time in Canada before there was legalized euthanasia here. That was back in 2016 when the law was first introduced. Can you just describe what was happening back then briefly before we get into what's happening today?
Well, we have to put it all into perspective. So there was the Carter decision, the Carter court decision made by the Supreme Court of Canada, and it struck down our old law, which said that euthanasia, which is lethal injection, which is then treated under the Homicide Act in Canada, because that's what it is, it's homicide. That the law was overbearing, is what they said. That the law needed to have exception for people in certain medical conditions. Now, the Supreme Court was very clear, though, that it needed to have the law that would come in needed to have a very strong set of safeguards so that this could be implemented in such a way that there would be no risk to other Canadians who are not seeking, quote, quote, an assisted death. The Carter decision also struck down the Assisted Suicide Act, and saying that the Assisted Suicide Act, once again, was overbearing. So you must understand that they were basing this on the fact that they said that a full prohibition on euthanasia or assisted suicide was too great a level of something to do. So that in fact there were conditions that this might be a reasonable situation to have euthanasia or assisted suicide. So the government brought in Bill C-14. Now you remember that this was the new Liberal government. The court decision came down during Harper's Conservative government,
Right.
and they decided to strike a commission to look at the question, and they decided to first go to an election before trying to legislate the issue of euthanasia or assisted suicide. So when the Liberals came in, they held a very fast sort of consultation. It was a very quick consultation, and then they presented Bill C-14, which legalized both euthanasia and assisted suicide. And the problems with C-14 were, in my opinion, quite clear from the beginning. It lacked any real definitions. So
Right.
let me give you an example. The law said that that your natural death had to be reasonably foreseeable. That to qualify for euthanasia, that means you had to be terminally ill. But it didn't mean that because it never defined what reasonable foreseeable meant. So these sort of things were in the original law, which really were wide-ranging in that sense without a definition. It also said euthanasia would be for physical or psychological suffering, but it never defined psychological suffering. It created a 10-day waiting period, but then it said in the very next line of the bill that the doctor or nurse practitioner could waive the 10-day waiting period. So you're seeing this was a sort of a legislation that was designed around polling, because the Canadians said that they wanted a waiting period. Canadians said they didn't want euthanasia for people who weren't terminally ill. Canadians said they wanted it for adults only, so the law said you had to be 18. Canadians said these things, so what the Liberal government did is it created a law that said one thing and another thing at the same time, which was Bill C-14.
Right.
And
And,
that's
and
where
I
we get
remember
started
I
with.
remember at the beginning, they wanted to make sure that this is what we were told at the time, that they wanted to make sure that the bill would not place vulnerable citizens within our communities at risk, because that was a directive of the Supreme Court decision. Not to skip too quickly over that, the
That's
Supreme
correct.
Court directed the government to ensure that vulnerable citizens were protected by the new legislative proposal, right?
Absolutely, and of course that's I think where the first place where the government strongly failed here. Even if you were to legalize euthanasia and assisted suicide, it did not actually follow Carter, because Carter wanted there to be strict conditions that would allow euthanasia and assisted suicide in a way that others would not in any way be, how would you say, threatened by it. Let's
Right.
say.
And now during, as part of that that agreement and the legislation at the time, I remember that the Trudeau Liberal government made a commitment that they would actually review the legislation as well to see how well people were being protected. Is that not correct?
Correct, correct. So Section 10 of the bill specifically says that there had to be a review starting on the beginning of the 5th year, meaning that on June 16th of 2020, the government needed to launch a review of the legislation. And it was very clear the review had to be of all the legislation, not just what the government chooses to look at, the whole euthanasia law, as well as the question of palliative care. Because the other promise the government made in 2016 is that they were going to significantly expand palliative care. And I think that was based on the fact that one of the strong arguments against euthanasia or against Bill C-14 at the time was, well, how can you allow euthanasia and assisted suicide when we don't even have effective palliative care in Canada? Is this really a choice?
Yeah.
And so this is the one thing they promised, and that's another place where the government has failed. We have not seen an improvement in palliative care. And I don't know if we'll have time to talk about it, but there's other issues around palliative care, such as the pressure that's put on palliative care institutions now to provide euthanasia.
Absolutely. Big subject all on its own for sure. And let's definitely
That's
talk
right.
about that again. But I want to move on because we've got this new legislative proposal that
Bill
is before the
C-7,
House
yeah.
now, Bill C-7. And it's an act to amend the criminal code with regard to medical aid in dying. Can you tell us about that and what that's all about right now?
So let's first go to that first failure. The government has not done their review of Bill C-14. They haven't done it at all. And yet, Bill C-14 said that there would not be any amendments to the law until there had been a review. So now you have a Quebec court case, and Justice Baudouin in Quebec struck down the reasonably foreseeable part of the law. So that means your natural death does not need to be reasonably foreseeable to have euthanasia. Now, the federal government should have appealed that decision, but never did an appeal. So therefore, that decision then becomes law. Okay, that's how it works if you don't appeal the decision. Now,
Right.
the problem with eliminating the reasonably foreseeable situation is that the law says you can have euthanasia for physical or psychological suffering. So immediately that brings in euthanasia for psychological suffering for someone whose natural death is not reasonably foreseeable, meaning someone who's not actually dying, as well as someone who might be going through some physical suffering who's not actually dying, someone who's chronic illness issues, chronic
Okay, so
problems.
mental
But
illness. So if you have a mental illness, you can, under this new legislative proposal, you could secure a medical aid in dying. Is that right?
well, the bill actually, now we're entering a very interesting thing. We could do a whole show on this one. I think the bill actually lies on this. The bill says that you cannot have euthanasia for mental illness, Bill C-7 says, but I believe that that is not actually true. And a lot of people have argued with me, but I don't see how it's possible that it's preventing euthanasia for mental illness because they've never defined psychological suffering. So in 4 years of euthanasia in Canada, the whole psychological suffering side of the you can have euthanasia for physical or psychological suffering has been included to mean mental illness. So to say you can't have euthanasia for mental illness does not then work if you haven't defined psychological suffering. And I've been making that argument over and over again that in fact the bill doesn't do what it says it does. The bill does a few other things though. It eliminates, so here's the first thing.
Yep.
The government was only required by the Quebec court decision to remove the reasonably foreseeable death requirement. That's all it was required to do. But what it did is much more. It decided to first eliminate the 10-day waiting period. So the current law has a 10-day waiting period. Now, I already explained that the 10-day waiting period was a bit of a joke in one sense anyway, because it could be waived. And so doctors were waiving it all the time. And in the Ontario stats, it shows that about 75% of the euthanasia deaths in Ontario, the doctor waited 10 days, and in about 25% then it didn't.
Right.
So, but the fact is, by waiving the 10-day waiting period, what it means is that you can have a same-day death. And I think this is insane if you consider the situation. If I have a very significant illness and I'm asking for euthanasia and I qualify for euthanasia, I could be having a very bad day. I could be emotionally distraught by something that's happened in my family, to my wife, to a child in my family, and then I'm have this medical condition. I go to the doctor wanting to die. I could die the same day. Now, if you look at data on this issue of same-day death in the question, we look at then the question of does the will to live fluctuate? And the answer is yes. But we can even go further. And in the Quebec data, and the Quebec collects more data than the rest of Canada, the Quebec data shows that about 325 people have in 2019 changed their mind. In 2019, changed their mind about euthanasia. They were approved, and then they changed their mind.
Right.
So when you consider that, if you have a same-day death, you've got no time to change your mind. You're going to be dead. On a bad day, you die. You never have an opportunity to have a good day because you died on a bad day.
Right.
This same-day death thing is actually quite ridiculous. Canadians wanted a waiting period or a reflection period, if that's what you want to call it. That's what Canadians wanted in all the polling previous to the 2016 legislation. Clearly, a majority said there must be a waiting period. It does something else which is even crazier. Because there is a situation where you can have euthanasia but not be terminally ill, not even be sick, you could have psychological suffering. And that psychological suffering is a personal issue because it's deemed by, I believe my suffering, that's how the legislation's written, I believe my suffering is too great. Well, if I'm not terminally ill, then there's a 90-day waiting period according to Bill C7, so I could die in 90 days. Well, I think this is a serious problem, and it's not a problem because they put in a 90-day waiting period. It's a problem because they created an inequality within the law. They've taken away a waiting period, and they've added a waiting period to those who aren't terminally ill.
Right.
And so you now have an inequality in the law that will be struck down by future court decisions. So what it means to me is over a very short period of time, there's going to be a court case that's going to be struck down, and then what you'll have is you'll have no waiting period for anybody. You'll have same-day death for people who are not terminally ill and same-day death for people who are terminally ill,
Right.
and it'll all be possible because, of course, that'll be struck down because of how they constructed the law. The construct of the law, to me, is the problem.
Very dangerous.
Well,
Very
the whole
dangerous
idea of
for
euthanasia
vulnerable
is the problem.
people. Absolutely.
Without a question, without a question. The other thing of it is that this law does something else. So if somebody had previously been approved for euthanasia, what can happen is they have this contemporaneous consent. So what it means is that I've been approved for euthanasia, and let's say 3 days later I had a stroke. So I've become incompetent. As the law is written at this very moment, they can't do euthanasia. They can't lethally inject me because
Right.
I'm incapable of consent at the time of death. But under this bill, Bill C7, they would be able to go ahead and lethally inject me because I've been approved previous to losing my ability to consent. So I think that's a serious problem. I think it's a serious problem no matter
Sure.
what, because you're talking about people who are unable to consent, dying by lethal injection. They lose the right to change their mind because they might have had a stroke or something might have happened to them after being approved for euthanasia.
Well, as you know, I agree with you 100%. And as you know, Alex, here at the National Leadership Briefing, one of the pillars that we rally around is that we really do hold the government to this high bar. We expect them to pass laws and enact policies that provide for the safety and security of the citizens, but especially the vulnerable among us. And this is another move in the direction of placing vulnerable people within our communities at risk. And there, when the government fails on such a foundational responsibility of theirs, I can assure you that the people here on the National Leadership Briefing, the people we serve, they take it seriously, and this is a big deal to them. Thank you so much for your time today, Alex, for just helping us to get up to speed on this. We're going to keep working on it here at the National Leadership Briefing and Canada Family Action. I know you're going to keep working on it, and let's keep in touch and do everything we can to make this not happen. Because it's going through the House of Commons quickly, isn't it? It's moving fast.
They're pushing it through. Yeah, they've got a court mandate to get it done. So
yeah. Thanks again, Alex. I appreciate your time
Thank you
today.
very much.
Look forward to keeping in touch. Bye for now.
Thank you, Doug.
Again, look to the post-briefing notes after the briefing today. You're going to be receiving an email with all sorts of resources. I'm going to make sure you have a link to Alex's website, the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition, all sorts of great resources there for you to use. We're also going to include a fantastic speech that was given by Garnet Jennis MP that we had on earlier on. I want to make sure you've got that information along with a transcript of the speech so that you can mine it for additional information. We also want to make it clear, though, as you communicate your concerns to your elected representatives about this particular bill, the Euthanasia Prevention Coalition has made it clear that there is no salvaging this piece of legislation. You are not going to turn this sow's ear into a silk purse by amending it. So the answer we want the parliamentarians to give when they are called to vote on it is against. We want them to be against this piece of legislation. And so please let your members of parliament know. Now, we're going to head over to the boardroom because I promised you, I'm going to show you what influence looks like. We've got some great examples to share with you, real-time examples, and then we're going to come back to the desk and finish up here because I'm so excited. We've got the second module of training for the CAG ministries. That's the Citizen Action Group ministries that we are teaching pastors and church leaders to put into their churches to help them advance what they believe in into the realms of society, culture, politics, and government. So we'll head on over to the boardroom for now, and I'll see you there and follow up back here at the desk. Bye for now. Okay, gosh, I love it here. This is great. All right, we're going to be talking about influence, and we're going to do it fast. I've got a list of examples here, and we're going to go back to the original. Remember this? This is the original commitment I made to you. We're going through all of these different layers. I'm going to give you an example in each of what influence looks like. Okay, first we're going to start with you, the individual citizen. That is the citizen that recognizes their authorities, and they know they've got authority in Canada to act and to do things. Authorities as citizens, authorities as constituents. So there's an individual citizen in a town in Ontario that decided that he was going to get in touch with his member of parliament and share his views on an issue that was before the House of Commons. That is one person making one call to a member of parliament and setting up a meeting and going to that meeting and saying, these are my views and values. This is my opinion on this situation. Thank you for hearing me. Very polite, very well received. That individual also took the opportunity to establish a relationship of trust and appreciation with that member of parliament. And now they have a relationship and they can get back in touch with each other. He didn't go in there and bash his hands down on the table. He was very polite. And now the parliamentarian actually looks forward to hearing from this individual in the future. So there's a relationship built there. That is the first thing. The next thing is there is a citizen in Ontario looking at personal networks who had a network of friends, all sorts of friends in Ontario, but then moved out to British Columbia, a whole brand new environment, didn't have any knowledge of a whole bunch of people like she had back home. So she got in touch with a whole bunch of new people here and established a personal network of people around her that shared her views and values. And then together, she made a commitment to them that she was going to keep them up to date on all of the issues that come up that where she feels that they can advance their views and values. So what she did in Ontario once, she knew she could do it there. So she did the exact same thing in British Columbia. So this is how easy it is to develop a personal network when you are out there talking to people about, hey, by the way, parents' right to raise their kids the way they want. How do you believe it? What do you think about that? You think that's important? How about your right of belief? Is that important to you? Yeah, it is. It's important to me too. Hey, there's some common ground here. We could probably get together. Hey, if I see any opportunities where we can solidify or advance these views into society, culture, politics, and government, do you mind if I get in touch with you? And she established a whole new network, a personal network around her that she could then keep informed and serve on issues that came up. So she has a lot of influence now because she's not by herself. So now, as great as it is that that individual person got in touch with the member of parliament, can you imagine when she gets on the phone and calls her member of parliament or her MLA or the mayor in her town and says, hey, you know what? We got 25 people. We are interested in the issues of the day. Can we get together and have a meeting with you? We'd sure love to hear your views on these things. We're really active in the community and we want to tell everybody what you tell us about the things that you're going to do to serve us in your office. So that is influence. That's a lot of influence. All right, now the next one is a citizen action group influence. The issue of conversion therapy pops up, and in Alberta it starts ripping across. There's all these bylaws being made in all of these towns in Alberta. All of a sudden there is one town where a church already has an existing citizen action group. Well, it turns out that church becomes the hub of activity that is now serving the nation on these issues. There's a lot of things that are happening in this one town because when the issue came up, these guys were already in motion. They had the citizen action group in place. And so the challenge came up and they needed to advance and communicate on this issue. All you do is you just go right into that church. We're already working on it, and we'd be happy to serve not only our own church family, but other ministries across the country. So they are active across the country. That's influence. And then finally, we've got a pastor in a church in a province here in Canada. I'm being a little cagey because I don't want to like out these guys and put targets on their back, but there's a pastor who decided that he was going to take an active role in deciding who the next member of parliament was going to be in their riding, and so got active with the other ministry leaders, the other ministerial members in their town, brought them all together and started bringing candidates that were running for office in that area before the ministerial. So one person had the vision to make change, brought his colleagues together on the ministerial, met with all the candidates, and together, because of the size of the number of people that actually participated in the election, the individual that they had identified that best represented their views and values was elected as the member of parliament in that area. Why is that so great? Why is that so much influence? Well, because when you've got issues like the ones we've been talking about today, like C6, the conversion therapy bill, when you've got the euthanasia bill, as the ministerial, the people who were instrumental in actually putting that person in office, you already have a relationship with that person. You help them, you help to get them elected. Now you can contact them and go, you remember that commitment you made to never ever pass a law or policy that would any way place vulnerable people in harm's way? Well, we're going to need you to fulfill that commitment to us now and vote no to the euthanasia bill in the House of Commons. Is that influence? I think that's a ton of influence, and I'm so glad that that pastor plugged into the NLB, received the information on the issues of the day and the opportunities that were before them, where they could pick the member of parliament, and took advantage of it. So these are examples of influence, and they're happening all across the nation, and you can be a person too with a good example. All you have to do is keep plugged into the National Leadership Briefing, because we're going to be bringing you opportunity after opportunity where you can have great influence and advance the things that you believe in. Now, we're going to go back to the desk right now real quick, and I want to introduce you to Module 2 of the Citizen Action Group Ministry, because that's instrumental. If you place this ministry within your church to serve you as a church leader especially, you can have the opportunity to have people helping you, everybody working together. Many hands do make light work. So let's go launch Module 2 back at the desk. And thanks so much for giving me an opportunity to share this very encouraging news with you about some of the things that are happening across Canada. Back at the desk. Bye for now. Well, what a jam-packed hour we have had so far, and we're just coming up to the end of our time here together. But I just want to remind you before we finish off introducing the CAG Ministry Module 2 that you will be receiving post-briefing notes today. A lot of valuable resources that are going to be available for you there. I encourage you, please take the time, especially on a day like this, to go through them and just to understand, what have I got here? What kind of tools do I have, and how can I share them? And of course, the all-important sharing is a big part of what we do here on the National Leadership Briefing. Please feel free to share the registration page from the National Leadership Briefing website at NLBcanada.ca. Again, that's NLBcanada.ca. Right on the very front, you can invite people to join us for the next National Leadership Briefing and all of the midweek touch points that we're going to have between now and the next briefing in December. So don't forget to share that and help grow our combined influence by growing the number of people that join us every month. Okay, so we're going to finish up here with the introduction of the CAG Group Ministry. So this is a Citizen Action Group Ministry, but I want to just preface what I'm about to say with a couple of things. Now, first of all, the training video that I'm going to be sharing today is going to be shared in the post-briefing notes. I'm not going to share it with you here on the briefing. I'm going to be including it in the post-briefing notes. And the reason I'm going to do that is because when we receive information like I'm about to share, I want it to be received in the right way, with the right understanding. Now, first of all, a Citizen Action Group ministry that exists within a church, it's very important that it is the pastor or the church leadership that makes these kinds of decisions for what happens inside of the church. So if you are someone who attends a church and you're watching this and you're excited about the idea of starting a citizen action group ministry within your church, I urge you, please do not just charge ahead. Set up a meeting, speak with your pastor, and share the resources that we're going to be sharing with you here today. Now, in the post-briefing notes, what are you going to be receiving? First of all, you're going to be receiving the introduction video for citizen action groups that we shared last month. That is the first video that we encourage you to review if you're just hearing about this for the first time. So if you're somebody who wants to share this with your pastor, that introduction video is the best thing to share with them. So take the link, take the downloadable file off of the post-briefing notes. We're going to provide them both for you, and get that over to your pastor and say, I think this might be something that we could work and use in our church. And you might be, by the way, the person that leads that ministry or participates in that ministry at your church to support your pastor. But let's start with informing them first and giving them the opportunity to review it. Now, as far as the second thing that you're going to be receiving today is the actual first module of the training. And where does the training start? Well, the training starts where I just encouraged you to start, with the pastor. In a successful citizen action group ministry, it's critical that the pastor has a clear understanding as to what it is and how it can best serve your church family or their church family. So they need to take the time to prayerfully consider and review the information, and we want to make sure that they have time to do that. So the first video is focused on the story of the pastor who we feature in the introduction, Pastor Craig Baroker. We're going to give you the extended version of his introduction, how he was introduced to Citizen Action Group Ministries and the successful one that he has operating at his church. So that is the first video. Now, I'm going to encourage you as a pastor or a church leader, before you watch this first video of the training, this is after the introduction that you've already seen, before you watch it, I want to encourage you to do one thing. And that is to establish in your heart and mind a desire to ask yourself the question, I want to know why. I want to know why I would have something like this operating in my church, helping me to advance the 4 pillars, serving my church family and serving me. I really want to get the why clear in my head. So that is what I'd encourage you to do is that just prayerfully consider the why as you're looking through the video that is the first module after the introduction. So I hope that's clear for now. I hope that's kind of going to hold back some of those really fired up, enthusiastic church family members that might want to charge ahead and get ahead of the pastor on this. I'm hoping that reins you in just a little bit and gives the pastor the time that they require to actually review this information and prayerfully consider it. And then tell them that they can look forward to, of course, next month when we're going to be actually diving right into actually the mechanics of setting one up. So we're going to start with the introduction video. Then we're going to go to answering the why question for your pastor and giving them the introduction to what the pastor's actually thinking as he's considering setting this up. And then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of setting it up next month on the National Leadership Review. So I hope that's clear as it can be. And in the meantime, I just stay excited because there's more coming. And all the way through this next month leading up to the next briefing, of course, we're going to have updates on the legislation we talked about today. We're going to have an opportunity to do the midweek touch points. You and I can talk on the answer period segments if you want to call me up and set up one of those with me. But until we meet again, I just want you to know that here on the National Leadership Briefing, we are praying blessing over you. We are continuing to pray blessing over your family, and we'll always pray blessing over this great nation of Canada. Thanks so much for your time today. Look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.
The bear has been poked. It's time to wake up from our slumber
and stand together, united as one. One family, one body, one church.
We will not walk past the vulnerable.
Say nothing, do nothing, and turn a blind eye.
We are citizens of a great nation.
We are good Samaritans to our neighbors. You are not alone.
We are the largest unified voice in Canada. So we stand united. This is our rally cry. We are Christ to our nation. This is our battle cry. he shall have dominion from sea to sea, and from the river unto the ends of the earth. Righteousness will reign. Justice will prevail. We are united.